Good morning, everybody. I'm up here, all eyes are on me, and it's 9 o'clock, so it's time to go, I guess. It's good to see everybody here this morning. Hope you're all doing well. It looks like we're starting to regain, there's a bell, it's official. We're starting to regain some of our number back that have been sick. It's good to see Dave back with us. He is still alive. For those that were curious, he's still around. We still have Betty. She's at home, but she is home from the hospital, which is a good thing. And I know that there continue to be many others that have been just dealing with this for several weeks, but haven't necessarily gone to the hospital or anything like that, but just struggling with illness. So we're glad that you're here. What we're going to do this morning is we are going to continue our look at personal evangelism, the idea of hearts on fire. This morning's lesson, though, is going to be just a little bit different. I've referenced this for several weeks, the fact that eventually we get to this particular lesson. And this is actually one of my favorites because I find it fascinating, actually, just on a personal level. So I'll just say that for me individually. But I want you to think about this lesson in the context of the overall study that we've been engaged in now for several weeks. So if you think about all the material that we've covered over the last 8, 9 weeks, give or take, it's been almost in essence building a house. So we kind of laid the foundation on the fact that we have a mission. There is an element that you and I are responsible for personal evangelism. We looked at Jesus as our model. We talked about the need for you and I to get out of our comfort zones. There's several different aspects that we talked about. We're almost similar to building a house. Each step at a time adds another layer onto it and gets us closer to what might be considered a finished product, per se, when we get to the end of the discussion. So that's how this lesson is as well. Consider this in the context of an overarching discussion on personal evangelism. I want to start with this week. I want to ask you a couple questions. Can anybody tell me what this logo, what company this logo might represent? This was a company's logo in 1900. You might want to take a guess what company. Pizza Hut. No, sir. We know where Dave's mind is, yes, ma'am.
A circus of some sort?
No, but that's a good guess. A road? No, but that's actually probably getting closer to the type of company. What's that? Nope.
Maybe terraforming?
No. Let's see if this will. Go ahead. So that was Shell Oil's logo in 1900. This is their logo in 1948, and I think this is their most recent logo that they use today. So you can see the progression from 1900 to where we are today. Now this one will be a little bit easier. If you got that one wrong, you'll get worried on this one, right? This is 1971. This was their logo in 1986, and anybody guess what's their logo today? There you go. That's their logo today. All right, let me give you another one. Anybody guess what that is? Don't read it. Anybody know what that was? Good. You can't see it. That makes it even better. Anybody guess what this logo was?
Oh, a beer or an ale?
Nope. I might get in trouble for that one. We're not going to go down that path. Yes. That's Apple Computer's original logo. Very good. This was Apple's original design for a logo in 1976. All right, this is what they transitioned to a little later in that same year. Many of you will probably remember that. And then their logo today is simply this, okay? Now, let's get one a little bit closer to home, right here in our own backyard. 1986, or 1886, Coca-Cola. 1990, and then today is simply just Coca-Cola. Now, what's the point? What are the implications of all this? Why do companies change logos, repackage products, change marketing messages? Why is there a need for all these companies to do that over the course of 100 years, 40 years, 50 years, whatever the case might be? Save money? Actually, you could argue it costs a lot of money. It's expensive. Marketing campaigns are extremely expensive. Just market research alone. I don't know about a brand like Coca-Cola it's a multi-billion. I would say on average, it's not uncommon for a major company, just in market research and what they might do in developing an ad campaign, to basis in excess, well in excess. Just in the research phase of $1 million. That's not in the production phase, just the research phase. Why do companies do it? Okay, to appeal to the next generation. Why is that important? Okay, you got to keep it fresh in their mind. What else? Well, absolutely. Ultimately, it comes back to getting sales. I mean, they're trying to get people to buy into their product, correct? What else? What's that? Want people to think it's better? Possibly. I want to focus in on the idea of appealing to different generations. And why is that important?
They don't stagnate.
Generations behave differently. Times change, don't they? People change. The world changes. So, for the most part, the core of these companies have been the same for the most part. Coca-Cola tried to get crazy there for a little while. We know that didn't work, right? With the new Coke. But by and large, the core of what they do, the heart of what they do doesn't change. So why is there a need then to change their message and to change their advertising and change their logo? Culture matters. It's fascinating. Some of you probably have a lot more experience in marketing than I do. I spent roughly about 3 years, I guess, in marketing over the course of my secular career. And it's not something that I necessarily love, but I did find aspects of it fascinating. It's incredible. And my mind doesn't work this way, some of yours might. But it's amazing the detail that goes in to research on how to advertise around something. The choice of a color scheme or a color pattern. Because colors convey thoughts and feelings to people. You can see a commercial, and for some folks, a certain color will elicit a specific feeling or emotion or response. And in turn, that leads somebody to a particular product or choice around the product. So the reality is, people change. There are differences in generations. I have a friend of mine that works for Pepsi, and he works in a segment of the company that they go out to universities. And what they do is they try to gain the rights to get access to the dining facilities, to the dormitories, so that they can have their products in there. And in order to get that access, what they have to do is they have to make donations to the athletic department. And it's a lot of money. Why do they do that, though? Why do they target that specific age group? If they can get somebody committed to their brand at that age group while they're between the ages of 18 to 21, research will show that they'll be committed long term, more than likely for the rest of their life, that they'll do that. So it's worth investing millions of dollars to get their products into a particular spot because of the long-term benefit out of it. So people change, so therefore messages have to change. Now, there's some implications for us as it relates to evangelism, but there's also something we need to remember fundamentally when it comes to evangelism. Somebody read for me Deuteronomy chapter 12 and verse 32. And then somebody else go ahead and turn to Revelation 22 verses 18 and 19.
Whatever I command you, you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to nor take away from it.
All right. Now, if somebody can read Revelation 22, 18 and 19 for me.
For I testify to everyone who hears the words of prophecy in this book. Whoever adds to these things, God will add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part from the book of life, from the holy city, from the things which are written in this book.
All right. I find these two passages fascinating. In essence, they're the same thing, are they not? But yet they serve as two bookends, if you will, to God's Word. So you have, in Deuteronomy chapter 12, the law, the old law, the beginning of that old law, relatively early in that process, Moses reaffirming that commitment with this group of Israelites as they prepare to enter the promised land. So it serves as a bookend almost at the beginning of this covenant relationship, and then there's a reminder at the very last book, at the very end of the last book, that God saw providentially to serve as closing, if you will, of the narrative of Scripture. God puts these two warnings in there that you can't change the message. All right, so there's a fundamental difference we need to understand as we engage in this discussion this morning. There's a difference between secular marketing and what they're trying to accomplish and what we do in evangelism. At our core, the message we proclaim cannot change. God has given us that message. It's His. He owns it. He has the right to tell us what we can and can't do, and He's given us those parameters. We have to work within that box. However, the way that message is presented, the way that message is delivered, the way that message is targeted to different groups matters. And we're going to see that, I think, as we go through our lesson together this morning. Many take the approach to evangelism of the idea of one size fits all, and that's just not true. People think differently. A 21-year-old thinks differently than a 71-year-old. They have different priorities. They have different focuses in their life. So therefore, a one-size-fits-all attitude really cannot be effective long-term when it comes to evangelism. Now, what I want us to do, we're going to focus on 3 different generations, all right? We're going to look at the 3 largest that make up the majority of the U.S. population. And I want us to look at some defining traits of each generation and then some characteristics. All right, and then we're going to make some assumptions and kind of tie all this back together as it relates to evangelism. Now, what do you know about baby boomers? Who make up the baby boomer category? Most of us here. Not true. Nice try. All right, so born between 1946 and 1964. So that puts somewhere, what would that be, mid-40s, late 40s? Is that 64, 74? 50s. Mid-50s, early mid-50s, somewhere up to 71 or so, right? Roughly, give or take. That's the group that we're talking about when you think about baby boomers, okay? What else do you know? Just facts. All right? Russ says we're younger than him. I didn't say, Russ came out of that voluntarily. I didn't bring that up. What else? Okay. That's going to be something we come to. Time of prosperity. They grew up with that in their mindset. You have comment?
Supposedly they're the most spoiled generation there is right now.
All right. We're going to have a word for that here in just a minute. Supposedly the most spoiled generation. I picked a kinder, softer word. But yours is right. Yes, ma'am. All right. Okay. All right. Not as subject to change, more traditional. Somebody else. They make up roughly 26% of the general population. All right? So you've heard that this is the largest segment of society. We're going to talk about that a little bit in more detail. 65% of this age group are currently married. All right? So that means roughly 35% are not for some reason, either widowed, divorced, whatever the case might be. 28% have graduated college. They are the healthiest and wealthiest generation that has ever existed. Now, what generation, or what did their parents experience in their lifetime? Great Depression. All right? So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind because that had a significant impact on this generation and their decisions and what defines them. All right? Healthy and wealthier than any previous generation. What else? Anything else you can think of? Just from looking at that, see, I said the me generation. Same thing, spoiled. They are considered the me generation. Just from looking at that, I want you to think, what are some implications now? What do you think are some characteristics that would define it? Let me make this caveat. I should have done this at the very beginning. These are generalities, okay? There are exceptions to the rule. We're painting with a broad brush, so please don't think that every single baby boomer is going to fit every single one of these to a T, or that every millennial will, or Generation X. So understand that coming in. We're talking in generalities here. What are some characteristics that you think would result in this generation because of what you see on the screen? Okay, they look at what's in it for themselves. Okay. Okay. From a healthier standpoint, they might tend to eat at home more than going out because they're more concerned with their health. All right, what else?
Probably more set in their ways.
Maybe more set in their ways. Could be, yeah. Number one, they're workaholics. So, one of the number one defining characteristics of the baby boomer generation is they were determined to be better off financially than their parents. They were driven, a lot of them, by money. That's what drove them. And as a result, they were consumed with work because they were determined not to end up financially like their parents did. All right, so that's one aspect of it. Independent, incredibly independent. Why might that be?
Their parents didn't have much more enough than they had as they were kind of finishing out. They had to basically a lot of time they were in themselves.
Okay. At times they had to fend for themselves, maybe because of how they grew up. Think about what we just talked about. What were they trying to do? They didn't get this great big nest egg inheritance when their parents died, did they? All right, they didn't come in. Most of them didn't come in at that money. So they had an attitude that if I'm going to get where I want to be financially, who's going to get me there? Me. Which gets back, I think, to the point you made in some aspects. They were goal-oriented again. Number one goal for most of them was the financial security. All right, but they were goal-oriented or are goal-oriented. Extremely competitive. Why would that be the case? And so climbing that ladder, but not just climbing the ladder, their peers, there were a lot of them, weren't there? I mean, for the longest time, this was the largest generation in society, numbers-wise. All right? So the competitiveness was there because they're all trying to achieve this financial independence, but yet the number of people they're competing against is really big. All right? So there's a competitive nature to it. Now, let's transition to Generation X. Who makes up Generation X? I do. I'm one of them. Pretty good, Russ. 1965 to 80. All right, so you're looking at, what would that be, early 50s to late 30s, roughly. That makes up, well, it'd be the other way around. So that makes up this particular generation from an age perspective. What else do you know about them? They were spoiled? All right. Might have been. I got to be careful here. I'm in this group. I like the baby boomer one a lot better. It's getting personal now. My toes getting cold.
One thing about it, they're not committed to their work. Places like previous generation. Previous generation, when they would work for a company, they stayed there until they retired. This generation, they may hold 3 or 4, 5 jobs. They're not even looking at retirement.
All right, so that's a great point. And we're going to see that progression change even as we continue down to the lower generations, right? So Calvin's point is, baby boomer generation, it wasn't uncommon in that generation for someone to get on with a company and stay with that company for a career, maybe 20, 30 years. Now, one of the things that's interesting, though, is it was also more common for a lot of those companies to have pension plans, right? So there was that incentive that went along with that. But you are 100% correct. Generation X, you're seeing a break for that. Now you're starting to see, and I think I know the number better for millennials. I'm not quite as familiar with it with Generation X. But it won't be uncommon for 5 to 10 at least different companies or jobs that a Generation X person might hold over the course of their life. All right, good point. What else? Yes, ma'am.
The term latchkey.
Latchkey kids. All right, so there's approximately 41 million of them, okay? So, again, pretty large segment of society. Why are they called latchkey kids? What were the baby boomers focused on? Making money. Why? Boy, isn't it amazing how the influence of our parents and grandparents trickles down? Absolutely, they were latchkey kids, all right? What that means is when they got home from school, they had a key to the front door, they let themselves in because mom and dad are both at work. Because mom and dad were going to be sure that they were financially secure. Absolutely, latchkey kids. Now, what else does that lead to? Okay, we'll get to that one. They inherited wealth.
Independence.
What?
Independence.
Independence, all right. They've been exposed to a lot of divorce. Okay? Now, again, this is going to train, we're going to see this over multiple generations. But this is really a childhood that was probably impacted more by divorce than previous generations had. All right, again, driven by this work ethic, caught up so much in work, parents going in different directions, and as a result, the divorce rate rose. All right? Now, another thing that baby boomers didn't have, let me go back to this for just a moment. Baby boomers, when they were younger, they didn't have much interest in religion. Now, what's interesting is, as they get older, you're starting to see them come back. Now, that's an interesting point when it comes to evangelism you and I need to think about, all right? But, because they weren't that interested in religion when they were younger, when they were in the prime of raising their family, you saw divorce rates go up, and these children from the Generation X, my generation, were exposed to divorce, either directly or indirectly in some capacity. Nearly everyone in this generation has probably been impacted by divorce in some way, shape, or form. All right? What else? Okay, they moved. All right? Let me tie this in. 29% of this generation have a bachelor's degree or higher. All right, so we're starting to see a trend from an education perspective as well. All right, 29% have a bachelor's degree or higher. Now, let's think about some characteristics of Generation X. They have a high level of skepticism. Why might that be? Think about some of the things we just talked about. How would the divorce rate play into a high level of skepticism? Trust? Okay, trust.
Let's say you got these quote-unquote bedrock institutions like marriage that, are supposed to be a lifelong endeavor, and then this generation has seen that disintegrate.
Correct.
So,
That's a great point. So, the one place that should be the safe haven, that should provide, as was mentioned, a bedrock of stability, they've seen it disintegrate, either directly or indirectly, and as a result, it's impacted their thinking around authority. And what's real and what's not, and it's created this high level of skepticism. They have a what's in it for me attitude, this idea of being spoiled. Now this is interesting. This is the first generation that will not do as well financially as their parents did. First one. All right? Again, that's going to be an important point to consider. Extremely independent. I think somebody mentioned that. Latchkey kids at home by themselves. They had to fend for themselves. Extremely independent. All right, now let's shift to millennials. And I hope that as you're thinking about these things, you're thinking about them in the context are, because here's where we're going. What's the implications of all this when it comes to us and evangelism and how we reach people? Have to approach them different. We're going to get there. What millennials? Who are millennials? (1981 to 2000). All right? I see fingers pointing. See, now I'm back to y'all. It's not me anymore. I'm good. 1981 to 2000. So we're talking, what's that? Late teens? Is that right? Yeah. Late teens to early, mid-30s, right? Give or take. So that's the millennial generation. Anybody want to take a guess how many of them? Come on, throw a number out. 64 million. Higher or lower? Somebody else? Lower. 74 to 83 million make up this particular generation. This is now the largest generation in our country. They passed the baby boomers actually a couple of years ago. Most diverse generation in history. Why might that be? That might have played into it. I have something a little bit else that I think plays into this. What's that? Okay, well, that's going to be a really good point. All right? He said more educated. What else, though?
Diverse in what way?
I would say this is a pretty broad
Like culturally?
net. Culturally, socially, almost any aspect of their life, to be quite honest. I mean, this is a very broad term and a process. I'm not focusing on a specific area. Yeah.
I'm gonna say two things. One, technology.
Okay.
Two, migration patterns. The whole dynamic of your career, your working life is totally different than the generation before. This generation is more mobile. We have to be more agile and move around to different locations. The idea of working for some organization and doing 20, 30 years and getting the gold watch and retiring off in the sunset is a fairy tale.
Yep.
To this generation. That's
Absolutely.
not even realistic.
And so, if my memory is correct, most millennials will have worked for at least 6 different companies before they turn 29 years of age, if I'm not mistaken. So it could be a little bit higher than that now. That was as of maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. They are on track to become the most educated generation ever. Ever. Now, I think that does play a role in the diversity aspect. No question about it. Let's talk about some characteristics, though, and I think we'll tie back into the diversity aspect. What are some characteristics of this generation?
This is something you may not know. Just based on, it looks like there's a higher suicide rate.
Okay.
Those down here.
Okay. So the comment was it looks like there's a higher suicide rate in this generation. I actually hadn't researched that one enough, so I probably don't know enough to speak on it.
Figures that every day news reports.
Sure. I don't, maybe. I don't know if anybody else knows anymore. I'm not as educated on that piece. Yes, ma'am.
They're more prone to instant gratification. They have microwaves, they have computers, all that.
So, Mike hit on this. I'm going to tie this into it as well. Technology is where they live, all right? And I think it affects this instant gratification. So, Susan and I were talking about this several months ago, actually. We talked about this offline a lot. But when we were growing up, you know, our friends, our circle that we hung out with, that we knew, that we called friends, they were people we went to school with. They were people we went to church with. Mom and Dad knew them personally, right? Probably knew their parents too. Boy, technology makes that a whole different world today. They're touching people in different states, in different countries, and they're all considered friends. But more than that, let me ask you this. If technology is where they live, and we don't engage with them in that segment, what are we saying to them? We don't care about you. Think about that for a minute. If we don't engage in social media, technology in some capacity, which is where they live, in essence, what we are telling them is we don't care about you. We want you to adapt to us. And listen, it's not Facebook anymore, okay? It's a very broad range. And if we don't learn to adapt to that, we're not going to be relevant to them. That's just reality. Even in how we communicate information out, matters to them. Tolerant, no absolute truth. I believe this plays into the diversity aspect as much as anything. This generation has been raised completely with the idea that there is no absolute truth and to be tolerant of anything and everyone. Give you a sobering statistic. There was research done, this is 5 years ago, I believe. 5 years ago. Maybe a little bit longer. This was done within the church. High school kids, 9th to 12th grade. And I'll go a little bit broader than the research did. But they asked these particular youth. Over 70% of them had grown up within the church or regular exposure to Bible class, Bible teaching, etc. They asked them, do you believe in God's definition of marriage and that anything outside of that definition of marriage is sinful? what percent do you think believe, and this is over 5 years ago, that any type of lifestyle outside of God's definition of marriage, fornication, homosexuality, any of that, what percent do you think said it was sinful?
20%.
A little bit higher than that. 32%. 32%. 68% said it was not sinful. Okay? So they've been raised with the idea of tolerance, no absolute truth. Here's something else that's fascinating. The average age of a first-time marriage is 29 years old. This is the oldest it's ever been. Out of any generation, they are postponing marriage longer than anybody. Why is that important? In terms of evangelism.
We need to reach the singles.
Okay, we need to reach the singles. Let me ask you this then. And this isn't just us here at Warner Robins. This is a religious issue to the group. What would you say is this? I'm going to use the term sweet spot. For somebody to walk through our doors, who are we most comfortable handling? Married with children, right? If you're married with kids, you know what to do with you. That's good. If you're married without kids, we can handle that, but it's not as easy. If you're single or divorced, man, that's a struggle for a lot of religious groups. That's going to become a bigger issue because more and more people that walk through the doors of a religious group are going to be single or divorced. Yes, ma'am.
I think a trend right now among millennials that are outside of the church is that one reason they're older when they get married is they don't think it's important to get married. I mean, I'm generalizing.
Yeah.
They don't think it's important to get married until they're ready to have kids. They
Yep.
they decide, well, we're going to have kids, so we need to get married. That's why they get married.
So, great point. Some of them are even postponing having children later in life too. You're seeing a lot more older parents. And I'll even take it a step further. Some are choosing not to get married at all. They're making that choice, right? Not because they can't, because they don't want to. Let's see.
They're living longer at home.
Oh, what? How about this? You said me I'm perfect. It's the boomerang effect. They're not just living longer at home. Many of them are returning home to live too. All right? And there's multiple reasons for that. For those of us in the Generation X, we're weeping over that. Many of them are returning home to live. Here's something that's extremely important though. Family and relationships matter to them immensely. Friendships, community, family. That's a bedrock of who this generation is. I mean, it is extremely, extremely important. Here's another one that's important. They're socially aware. Now, we talk about jobs a lot. This generation, not driven by money at all, by and large. At all. In fact, research would bear out over and over again that the vast majority of them would tell you they would take a lower paying job that was more rewarding for them personally and fulfilling than they would a higher paying job. They're not driven by money. They are socially aware. They're aware of the needs of their community. This generation volunteers their time more than any previous generation. Right? So as much as we say certain things about different generations, especially the millennials, a lot of times they get cast in a bad light. There are some extremely positive characteristics of this generation that if we would just look at it, man alive, it's perfect for what the church is about. Relationships, meeting the needs of communities. But here's what's interesting about millennials when it comes to religion. They don't want to hear about us talk about our religion. They want to hear the community talk about us. That's how they want to be exposed. Right? If they don't hear about a group, a religious group, being talked about in the community, meeting the needs of that community, they're not interested in sitting inside a building hearing us talk about it. And you know what? That's pretty legit. Because New Testament Christianity is about doing for others, right? And they hold people's feet to the fire when it comes to this. So there's a lot of good characteristics here. Now, I just wanted to show this because I think this is interesting. I mentioned 2014 actually was the year that the millennials passed the baby boomers. They are now the largest segment of society. But here's the other thing that's interesting. We're only about 10 years away from the Generation X passing the baby boomers as well. All right? So it's just kind of interesting to see where society's going, the makeup of this, because all of this has implications when it comes to evangelism. Now, what are the implications? I want you to think about everything that we just talked about. Now let's try to come back and tie this together and kind of package it up and think about what does it mean for us as we try to reach people with the gospel? What are the implications of all that we just talked about? After what? Oh, absolutely. So we set out at the very beginning, we've established we are not talking about changing anything doctrinally, all right? That's non-negotiable. But how we reach people absolutely matters. Can you approach a baby boomer the same way you can a millennial? They don't care about the same things in many ways. They're on two totally different pages. I'll share, again, a personal example. Just think about communication. Just think about communication. When I went to work for Merck back in 2000, we had an internal voicemail system. And I mean, that thing, you wore it out. I mean, you had to stop. We're out working in the field, going from place to place. You have to stop. You don't pay phone. You check it 3 times a day. Any communication at all went out into that voicemail. When I left in 2013, that thing, it was still there, but nobody used it. How do you think everybody communicated? Oh, email's gone too. That's text messages. Absolutely. Email's archaic to the millennial generation. Voicemail, I mean, it's rapidly changing. So how we communicate, how we engage with the message matters. And it's going to be different from generation to generation. What about the divorce aspect? As more and more people are impacted with divorce, it impacts their view of authority. Boy, doesn't the view of authority matter when it comes to religion, Dave?
But the change in how we reach out, say, from email to text, it also changes the message. In the sense that it's much shorter.
Yeah.
They're not as the depth of changes.
Absolutely.
There's a different approach to speaking.
Yep. Absolutely. So we talked about it. I don't think any of us could argue that it matters. These differences do matter. And our approach matters. I think we have to ask ourselves, who do we attract with our evangelism model? When people walk through the door of our building, what are we attracting? In the way that we engage with people, in the way that we meet people's needs, in the way that we communicate with people. People make decisions when they walk through the door of this building. Within the first visit, people will walk out of here with their mind made up whether they'll ever darken the store again. And a lot of it's based on the fact of, are we meeting their needs? And what's scary is there's a lot of needs to be met when you think about it. And if we pigeonhole ourselves to only meet the needs of one segment, that's all we're going to attract. And in order to be a congregation that's gauged for growth, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, we've got to attract every aspect of society to continue to build the Lord's church. So I turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, read verses 19 to 12. Let's just go there together. I'll read this. First Corinthians chapter 9, beginning in verse 19. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I may win more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, so that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. I do all things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it. What is Paul saying here? He said, I have personal liberties that I have a right to, but I set those aside so that I can meet the needs of people, no matter how diverse, no matter how different they might be, so that I can ultimately give them the message of the gospel of Christ. That's in essence at the heart of what Paul's saying. I don't allow my own wants, my own desires, the things that I may have a right to do. That's not what's important. What's important is when Paul looks out, he sees this broad range of people. different backgrounds, different needs, and he says, I put my own personal liberties aside so that I can become whatever that person needs, so that I get that gospel message to them. Two keys to growth that I want us to think about. One, find the needs in the community. Why do you think that's important? Let me share this with you. I find this fascinating. There are approximately 40 instances of suffering people healed by Jesus in the gospel accounts. Only 6 of them came to Jesus on their own. That means 34 were either brought by their friends or by family to Jesus. See, if we don't understand what the needs are in a community and go out to them, the majority are not going to come here to us. People, even with Jesus, only 6 out of 40 came on their own. Find the needs in the community and start meeting those needs. And if you meet those needs, word spreads, and it leads to this. There has to be Bible studies. I'm going to call them neighborhood. What that means is personal, in-home type Bible studies. Evangelism, very seldom will somebody totally be converted by nothing more than just coming to work. It happens, but it's not the norm. Now, in order to do these 2 things, here's something that's important. Relationships matter. K.C. Hinckley, in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, lists 4 things I want to share with you on relationships. The first is the idea of taking the initiative. What does that mean? In terms of building relationships, what does it mean to take the initiative?
Make the first move.
Be the first to say hello. Now think about this in the context of visitors that come into our building, okay? I want to think about it in that context first. Now it extends beyond that. It's how we interact in society. It's how we interact with each other as a church family. Be the first to take an initiative to say hello. Be friendly. Be genuinely interested. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes my mind races so much that I have to really make myself slow down. It's not always easy to be genuinely interested. And I've learned to be careful what questions I ask if I'm not ready to do that at the moment. Don't ask, hey, are you okay? If you're not willing to be genuinely interested in somebody's response. Establish rapport. What does that mean? What is rapport? It's an attitude of mutual acceptance. Yep, which creates a level of comfort. It's being sensitive to specific needs and opportunities on where you can serve. Again, a key aspect of this is listening. It comes back to listening. Be a friend. This one's tough because the reality is being a friend has a price tag. Doesn't come cheap, does it? Being a friend is not always easy. It means putting other people first. It means listening. It means being transparent. Being accepting of other people's differences. Building a relationship. Letting the other person see inside of you, seeking other people's counsel, sharing your personal resources, and making time. 4 key elements of building relationships. Now, try to tie all this together in terms of personal evangelism. Turn to 2 Timothy real quick. Let's read chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. As I read this, here's what I want you to think about. Tell me if this is the type of relationship you would like to have. If you'd like to have somebody write this about you. I thank God whom I serve with a clear conscience the way my forefathers did, as I constantly remember you in my prayers night and day, longing to see you, even as I recall your tears, so that I may be filled with joy. For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I'm sure that it is in you as well. Would you like to have a friend that talks about you like that? That said, I'm praying for you day and night. See, that's the type of friend we need to be. We've got to form real relationships with people. I'm going to say not for your relationships. You know what those are, right? Hey, how you doing? Good. How about you? Great, right? Slow down. Really get to know people. It may mean talking to fewer people, but having better quality in those conversations. Because you see, in order to really make a difference in people's lives with the gospel, remember, evangelism is 2 things. It's external and it's internal. So that means that part of evangelism is what we do for each other as well. We got to form real relationships. We got to be careful how we present present ourselves in the gospel because we don't want to be catered to just one group. We don't only want to be reaching Generation X and neglecting baby boomers and millennials. We don't want to forget about Generation Y. We don't want to forget about the greatest generation. We don't want to leave out anybody. Because everybody needs the gospel. Everybody does. And I would challenge each one of us with this. Work this week to begin forming a new, meaningful relationship with somebody. Because that's really where it starts. Just getting to know somebody on a little bit deeper level and thinking about how you can meet their needs. All right, I did a lot of talking. I'm going to give you guys the last word. Anybody have a comment? All right, I appreciate your time. Dismissed till 10 o'clock.
I've done duty today, so let's get a handbook. Turn to number 811. 811. Saying all 4 words. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus in the morning, Jesus at noontime, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus when the sun goes down. Love Him, love Him, love Him in the morning, love Him at the noontime, love Him, love Him, love Him when the sun goes down. Serve Him, serve Him, serve Him in the morning, serve Him at the noontime, serve Him, serve Him, serve Him when the sun goes down. Praise Him, praise Him, praise Him in the morning, praise Him at noontime, praise Him, praise Him, praise Him when the sun goes down. Next hymn will be hymn number 78. 78. We'll be singing all 3 verses of this hymn. After this hymn, we'll go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. And you count the stars of evening that are shining in the sky, and
so grateful that we can be called your people. Father, as we worship you as the true living God, we pray that our songs will glorify you, and we're honored and so grateful, Father, that you hear our prayers. Father, be with us as we are gathered here this morning, that we might be attentive to your message, so that we can all be strengthened and we can all be used as instruments of your will. Father, we also pray on behalf of those who are sick, and there's a great multitude that are sick, Father. We pray that you will be with each of them, that you will provide them peace, comfort, and your healing. Again, Father, we thank you for allowing us to be here. We thank you for who you are. We thank you for your Son, who is our Savior. We thank you for all that you do. And we pray all this in your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Our next hymn is 499. 499. Sing the first and fourth verses of this hymn. Following this hymn, we'll have our offering. Oh, to be like thee, blessed Redeemer, this is my constant longing and prayer. Gladly I forfeit all of earth's treasures, Jesus thy perfect likeness to wear. Oh, to be like thee, oh, to be like thee, blessed Redeemer, pure as thou art. Come in thy sweetness, come in thy fullness, and thine own image deep on my heart. Oh, to be like thee, Lord, I am coming, now to receive that longing divine. All that I am, and I am bringing, Lord, from this moment, all shall be thine. Oh, to be like thee, oh, to be like thee, blessed Redeemer, pure as thou art. Come in thy sweetness, come in thy fullness, and thine own image deep on my heart.
At this time, we have the privilege and the responsibility, Christians, to return to God a portion of His blessings with. How are we to give? We find in 2 Corinthians, the 9th chapter, verses 6 through 11. Paul writing to the Corinthians on how to give. But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace around you abound towards you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. Let us pray. God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the blessings you've given to us. We thank you for your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ, and the spiritual blessings we have from him. This time, Heavenly Father, as we return to you a portion which you bless us with, we pray, Heavenly Father, that we'll do cheerfully as we purpose in our hearts. Heavenly Father, we pray that these funds will go to your glory. You may receive the honor that the works being done
prepare to take the Lord's Supper, let's turn to hymn number 867. 867. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord. And he will lift you up. And he will lift you up.
As we prepare our minds to take the Lord's Supper, commemorating what Christ has done for us, I'd like to read Romans 5th chapter, verses 6 through 11. For when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet perhaps for a good man someone will even dare to die. But God demonstrated his own love towards us, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Much more then, having been now justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath through him. For if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. And not only that, we also rejoice in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received reconciliation. Let us pray. God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for all that you've done for us, for sending your Son to die on the cross for our sins. Heavenly Father, now that we partake of this bread which memorializes his body, may we do so remembering that he willingly died on the cross because of our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Take of this and remember back what Christ did for us. And he willingly and lovingly died because of us. Jesus and you. Amen.
Those that are following in the hymn book for invitation songs, it's in number 207. 207. Go ahead and mark that. Our song for the lesson will be singing hymn numbers 809 and 810. 809 and 810. I'd like to encourage all the little children out there, big children alike, to join us in this song. Let's stand. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Red, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world.
put him in the midst of them, and said, Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me.
If you don't mind, just a little bit, the one on the, up here, maybe number 6, I'm not sure. Good morning. So good to be together on the Lord's Day. We want to welcome each of you. We have visitors with us today. People are traveling, passing through. I know we have some visitors from South Carolina. We want to welcome you. And it's blessed to have the Gill family with us this morning. Wasn't expecting to see them. They left us maybe a couple years ago or so and moved to Texas, and now they're on their way to Florida. So I guess you might imagine they went somewhat out of their way to be with us today. We're thankful to see them. And all of you. We have Robin Connie's son and daughter-in-law with us as well. We have so many that have been sick, and some are doing better and able to be with us this morning. We thank you for your progress. I want to express my appreciation to you for your prayers and all your kindness for Betty and myself, as she's been under the weather for some time now and was able to get out of the hospital on Friday. And she needed to go. I wish she never gotten well without that. So we're thankful she was able to get admitted and was able to receive some treatment and do it better back at home. And we appreciate your prayers for her. You may or may not be aware, I don't know if you've seen on Facebook, but Charlie Buster Biden is back in the States safely, and we're so thankful for that. He's been away on TDY for an extended period of time, and we're thankful he's made it back safely to us. However, he's not feeling well this morning. Not sure if he's come down with a cold or the flu, so we can be mindful of him, and again, so many others that are sick at this time. As I spent time in Costa Rica recently, had the opportunity to be in the presence of some young children. And as I had the opportunity all the time to be in the presence of our young people here in Robbins, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the heart of children. There's so many things that you and I can learn from children. That's the point of our lesson today in Matthew chapter 18. Our title is Adopting the Heart of a Child. I want us to set the stage for our lesson as we think about some things that were going on in the life of the disciples and Jesus. As you recall in chapter 16 of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus has been with his disciples in the coast of Caesarea Philippi. And it's there he asked his disciples who he was. And on that occasion, of course, Peter spoke up and he confessed him as being the Son of God. And Jesus made his promise in that reading of Matthew 16 that he would build his church. In the next chapter, in Matthew chapter 17, Jesus goes up on a high mountain with 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John. And it's there that he experiences the transfiguration before them, impressing upon their minds that there is none other like he, that he truly is the Son of God, and that they are to give ear to him. As he comes down from that mountain, he experiences some things. There's a man that approaches him, asking for mercy concerning his son. He has only one son. He has one child, and he has been possessed by evil spirits that were afflicting him terribly. And the disciples had tried to heal this young boy, but they've been unsuccessful. And so this man makes a strong appeal to Jesus for compassion, for mercy for his son. And Jesus rebuked the evil spirit, called him out, and he healed that man's son from that very hour. Jesus, he fed
the hungry. And as we come into chapter 18, Jesus has just been traveling to the city or the village of Capernaum. And he's entered into a house. And other writers talk about how that Jesus, he speaks to the disciples, asks them about what they've been talking about as they've been traveling, making their way to the village of Capernaum. In chapter 18, as we look at our text, we'll thank DeForest for reading for us this morning, also for Steve for the songs he's led us in that have reference to children. In Matthew 18, verse 1, I'm going to read through verse 6 at this time. Matthew 18, 1 through 6. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, "Surely I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whosoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea." On this particular occasion, Jesus had a question for his disciples. And Jesus, he heard what they had to say, and he, of course, knew what was in their heart. Jesus knows what is in the heart of all men. There were various qualities that were expressed by the very question and the disputes that they had been engaged in. They've been involved in some discussions and some disputes and debates among them. This was something that was going on over a period of time concerning who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. They were experiencing thoughts of rivalry and jealousy and ambition. The disciples had a me-first mentality that they needed to wipe away, they needed to erase from their minds, because it was foreign to the spirit and the nature of Jesus and those who would enter into the kingdom. These disciples of our Lord were somewhat presumptuous as they were thinking about who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus had been talking about his leaving this earth. He's been talking about being turned over, delivered into the hands of men, into the hands of sinners, and how that he would be crucified, he would be put to death. But simply, they failed to grasp his continuing words that he would be raised up on the third day. And so they're thinking in terms about who's going to be left in charge, who is going to be reigning and ruling, who's going to be significant, who's going to be most significant in the kingdom that Jesus was soon to establish. No doubt Jesus was disappointed in their spirit, in the things that they were having to say in this particular matter concerning being the greatest in the kingdom. As we think about children this morning, there are a number of wonderful qualities that are in the hearts of young people. I think about humility. They're genuine. They're transparent. They're friendly. They're forgiving. And they are loving. This morning, let us think just a bit about adopting the heart of a child. Jesus gave an either-or proposition here. He does that from time to time. It was either you convert and become as little children, or you will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. So you and I are talking about life and death matters this morning. We're talking about having God's favor in the present tense and being able to have fellowship with Him and to be able to live with Him in eternity in the world to come. And so they need to have a heart of humility. He says in verse, so Jesus, often as he taught by means of parables. Jesus often used something that they were familiar with, something they could see, and they were able to draw that spiritual lesson. In this particular time, in this lesson that Jesus gives his disciples in Matthew chapter 18, Jesus gives another type of lesson. As he calls a young child, we don't know his age, we don't know the identity of the child, but nonetheless, Jesus calls him this child. So this child was of age that was able to walk. It was a child that was able to understand Jesus as he calls forth a child that knew to respond in the affirmative. So this child comes to Jesus. Jesus often embraced children. He would take them up in his arms, and he would speak to them. And on this occasion, Jesus used this child as an object lesson for these people. At this particular point in time, in the days of Jesus, you're probably well aware that children did not have rights. They did not have any kind of rights. They were, well, slaves and women, and children were sort of lumped into the same category. They were unimportant in the society of that day. And it's quite remarkable that Jesus was willing to call a little child, someone that was unimportant in the eyes of the world, unimportant in the eyes of the Jewish leaders, unimportant in the eyes of the disciples. He calls this little child and sets him in the midst of them to draw and teach an object lesson. Jesus knew what was in the heart of this little child. He knew what was in the heart of young children. This characteristic, this quality of humility. The world has a different idea, a different mindset. Oftentimes, grown-ups look down upon children. They do not care for them as they should. They do not treat them with respect. They do not honor them as they should be respected and honored. But Jesus saw the heart of this child, this heart of humility. And so he says in verse 3 to these disciples, "Assuredly I say unto you, unless you are converted," the word here is the idea of turning. You need to change your way of thinking. Of course, the word adopt can refer to voluntarily taken as one's own child. But here's where we're using it this morning. We're talking about accepting formally and putting something into effect. That's to take it into practice or use. They need to have a different mindset toward the kingdom and their approach to others. And so Jesus says you need to turn, you need to change your way of thinking about one another, about yourselves. You're not going to be ruling like that. You're not going to take positions of power and authority in the kingdom as you're thinking in terms of the world. You need to turn and become as little children if you will enter into the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, verse 4, whoever humbles himself as a little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And so they need to stop thinking about me first. They need to think about others. They need to think about elevating others rather than themselves. They need to humble themselves and not think about being the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It may well have been that each one of the disciples, and those who would ultimately come to part of the 12, may have been thinking in terms that I should be the one. I should be the one that should be honored and elevated to this position. I should be the one to take charge and lead in the kingdom after Jesus leaves this world. Jesus, on this occasion, did not speak in those terms. He did not say that the greatest would be Peter or John or some other. Jesus said, you don't need to be thinking like that at all, because the kingdom is not a temple kingdom. The kingdom is a spiritual kingdom. And you will not be ruling in such a way as that. You will not be taking a place of power and prestige. As we think further about the hearts of children this morning, a child, we need to adopt not only a heart of humility, but we need to adopt a heart of trust. A heart of trust. In the Gospel of John chapter 6, verse 5, on this particular occasion, there was a young boy. A multitude had gathered around. In fact, there was some 5,000 men that we fed on this occasion, as John records this narrative. And Jesus was concerned about the people. They needed to be fed. They were hungry. They'd gone for a period of time without eating. And there was a young boy there present that had 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. And I'm not sure what he had it for. Perhaps it was food that would be a sustenance for himself and his family. But Jesus called for this young boy's possessions. He called for the 5 barley loaves and the 2 fishes, and he took those and he prayed to God, giving thanks, and then he distributed to the multitudes. And after everyone had eaten, even after they had partaken and they were filled to the full, They took up what was left over, some 12 baskets full. But the point here that I want to make is concerning this young boy. The young boy who had in mind his needs and perhaps the needs of his family. And yet he was willing, in trusting Jesus, he was willing to give that up in order that Jesus might bless not only himself, perhaps his family that were present, but also the multitudes that exhibited a spirit of trust as he was willing to share the meager substance that he possessed. You and I need to have a heart of trust in Jesus. We need to trust him as a young child, that we're willing to follow where he leads. Wherever he leads, we're willing to go all the way. Jesus shows in this young man a heart of trust. Children trust adults. Children trust grown-ups. And as adults, as parents, as grandparents, and neighbors and friends and young people, we need to be careful about refusing to violate that trust. We have seen recently in the news where young people, their trust was violated, where children have been abused physically and emotionally. I want to make a point here in the study that Jesus talks about receiving children and the way that adults deal with children. He says, what you do to children, you are doing to me. And so you and I, as grown-ups, we never need to violate that trust. Never abuse a child in any way, whether physically or emotionally or sexually or whatever the case may be. Children inherently have a heart of trust toward grown-ups. Think about a heart that's eager to learn. Children are much like a sponge. They take in so much of what they see and hear around them. You and I, as grown-ups, need to be like children, in that we hunger to learn. Think about 2 Timothy 3:14 through 15, where the Apostle Paul writes, he's speaking about, he's addressing Timothy and how he had been taught. He was encouraged to continue the things he had been taught and learn from a child. From a child, he had learned the Holy Scriptures, which were able to make him wise to salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. Timothy had been taught from a young boy principles of God from his grandmother and his mother. Timothy, like all young people, were eager to learn. You and I need to have a heart that is willing to listen and to learn. A heart of humility is a heart that is willing to learn even from one's peers and even children. Jesus, on this occasion, was appealing to his disciples that heart of humility. As he sets his child in their midst, he says, you, even though you're grown up, and you look at these children as being useless and worthless and low in society, there's some things that you need to learn from these children. Today, Jesus continues to say to you and me, there are things that you and I can learn from the heart of a child. Timothy, as a young boy, was eager to learn. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 2, the Bible says that we, as newborn babes, desire the sincere biblical word that we may grow thereby. You and I, as grown-ups, when we enter the kingdom of heaven as babes in Christ, we need to be hungry as a child, as an infant, craves its mother's milk. You and I are to crave the word, the milk of the word, that we can grow. But once we grow into maturity, we are to hunger for the meat of the word. As grown-ups, we should never stop learning. We should always be humbling ourselves, not having the mentality that I already know it all. Sometimes that's the attitude that adults have. Will not listen. I don't need anyone to teach me because I already know. And so I will not listen to anyone. You and I need to have a heart that's eager to learn, a heart that is humble, willing to listen. We can learn from one another, and we can even learn from children. You and I need to adopt the heart of humility, the heart of trust. We need to adopt a heart that is eager to learn. In the fourth place this morning, we need to have a heart of genuine love. We need to have a heart of genuine love. Romans chapter 12, verse 9. Paul writes to the Roman saints, let love be without hypocrisy. A child's heart, a child's love for his parents and others is so pure. It's without pretense. And that's precious. You and I need to have that kind of heart. That we're not faking, that we're not just saying, oh, how I love you. But it's real, that it's genuine. You and I need that heart of genuine love. Children are innocent. A child, no doubt, that Jesus called to set in the midst of the disciples, had a heart of innocence. A heart that was not filled with evil. It did not pursue evil pursuits. You and I need a heart like that. A heart that is transparent. A heart that is genuine. A heart that is not filled with evil. That's the heart of a child. You and I need to have a heart like a child. Jesus, in so many of his ways, had a childlike heart. Jesus was humble. Jesus was genuine, transparent. Jesus was friendly, and he was forgiving, and he was loving. This morning I want to ask, are you and I like Jesus? Do we have the heart of Jesus? Do we have the heart of a little child? There's so much that you and I can learn from each other. There's so much that you and I can learn from children. You and I need to be watching. You and I need to be listening. And we need to receive those lessons in your hearts. Because, as Jesus put it, except you are converted, except you turn and become as little children, you shall in no wise enter into the kingdom of heaven. It takes a heart of humility to hear the words of Jesus concerning becoming a Christian. It takes the heart of humility in order to repent of one's sins, to turn from one's path of iniquity. It takes a heart of humility to confess Jesus as the Son of God and as one's Lord. And it takes a heart of humility to submit to the command of being baptized for remission of one's sins, as Peter preached on the day of Pentecost. It takes a heart of humility to come back home and to say, I have sinned. As the prodigal did so long ago. It took a heart of humility to say, I'm not worthy to be called your son. Just please, make me one of your servants. And that would be great. That would be sufficient. I would love that. This morning, where is your heart? What is the state of your heart? Do you have a heart of a child? Do you need to come to Jesus and adopt his spirit? If that be the case, would you come with us and sing?
Son. still have several that are sick and out. Our brother Phil Lewis is at home now. And Bill Mathis is at home. Ruby Law is also at home, and Curtis Friday went home from the hospital, but I believe Curtis is here today. Sister Betty Childs is home from the hospital today. Lois Thompson was transferred to Coliseum Hospital to begin rehab. Here says her mother is for the week and battling pneumonia. Under our prayer request, Bill Stillwell, father of Sister Connie Wilson, is at home from hospice care in East Liverpool, Ohio. Clyde Ball, brother Joyce Loftus, will be having quadruple heart bypass surgery tomorrow in Charleston, West Virginia. And I know Joyce left surgery with us, so keep them in prayers. Sympathy is extended to our Sister Margaret McConnell, passing of brother Tom Meyer, Apostle W.O., passing of her brother Curtis Shurko, Oscation, the passing of his hand being blocked, and to Joyce Cox, the passing of her nephew, Mary Earl. And visitation for Joyce's nephew will be at the Calm Funeral Home tomorrow from 3 services at 3 p.m. Activities today, there's an elders meeting and preachers meeting this afternoon at 3 o'clock in the fellowship room. Last leaders will meet today. Just some additional information, last leaders, there'll be no boys song leading. And last leaders today, and Mark says it, will meet at 2:15 in the 4 to 5 room classroom. Ladies' night out will be tomorrow evening, February 5th, at 6 o'clock at Sunday's Barbecue. And something new for the men's luncheon, we're going to have a men's fellowship breakfast starting Saturday, February 10th at 8:30 at the Warner Robins Restaurant. And the trip to Stone Mountain has been canceled. So that's your information. Tonight after services, we're going to be celebrating our Sister Margaret's retirement as a church secretary. And please encourage everyone to come out for that and be there. Please bring finger foods and drink and dessert will be provided. Upcoming area-wide events, the Georgia School of Preaching and Biblical Studies will have a 13-week course of Isaiah starting February the 6th through May the 15th, each Tuesday night from 6 to 8 p.m. And the instructor will be Brother Johnny Scans. Let's stand and we'll dismiss. I'm going to pray this all in heaven, Father. We thank you for today, for this day that you blessed us with. Father, we thank you for the rain, the nourishes, Father, and nourish the earth. Father, we pray that you'll be with those that have been mentioned that are sick and those that we're not aware of, Father. Father, please restore back to much more health. Father, be with those that have lost loved ones recently, and be with them in their time of sorrow. Father, please forgive us for our sins.